Hello, my name is Alice, and today I have the January 2021 Paletteful Premiere Pack in front of me, so let's open it up and see what's inside. Okay, so this is the Daniel Smith Extra Fine Watercolor Pack, which I'm really excited about because I love Daniel Smith. They're actually my favorite watercolor brand, and so I'm really excited to work with these products. So everything in here is going to work great together. And the first thing that I see is this Daniel Smith folding palette. This is so cute and small. So this palette opens from the corners. So you want to use like the corners to open it. And it has a mixing well like on the top for mixing your paints, but it also has all of the different pans so that you can put your liquid watercolors in there, and then you can let them dry and then you can carry it with you. This is really, really slim, which is really nice. So it's a very like sleek design. I like it a lot. The next thing that I see in here is this masking fluid. This is also by Daniel Smith, and it comes with a 5-tip five different applicator tips so that you can like keep them clean and wash them out, and it'll just like help keep things from getting all gunked up and stuff. So masking fluid is really cool. It's basically this type of liquid fluid that creates a barrier to protect the white areas of your paper when you're painting, and then you can peel it off at the end and you will have the like blank area. It's very cool and I love working with it, so I'm really excited that we have this. The next thing that I see are the paints themselves. So there are 3 different paints in here, and the colors that you're going to get are Mayan Blue Genuine, Rose Ultramarine, and Viridian. So Mayan Blue Genuine is one of the Primatech colors, and it's a green tinged indigo. The Rose Ultramarine is a mix between quinacridone rose and ultramarine blue. And the blue really like kind of settles, and then the rose floats. So it creates this really dimensional purple. Then there's Viridian, which is a blue-green, and it's a transparent non-staining pigment. And it's just going to be really helpful to balance out that color palette. The next thing that I see in here is this silver golden Taklon brush. This is a number 6 size brush, which is a great all-arounder size. It has fibers of Taklon, which will enhance color carrying capacity, and you can use this with both watercolor and acrylic. Then we have the paper. This is the Strathmore 400 series watercolor paper. This pad is 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and it has a really strong surface that's going to be great for lifting and scraping. And this is the cold press. There is also this cute little sticker that comes along, which I think is absolutely adorable. And this is everything that you're going to get in the 2021 Paletteful Premiere Pack Daniel Smith Extra Fine Watercolor Pack. That was a lot of words. I am so excited because these are seriously my favorite watercolors ever. So I'm just very excited to play with them again. So let's make some art, and I will show you how I use these and some of my techniques. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the palette, and I'm going to put the paints in the little paint slots so that they can dry, and I'm going to paint from there. I just personally prefer to have my paints dried in a pan, so that's why that's the first thing that I'm doing. I live at really high altitude, so I always make sure to open all of my paints directly over the paint pan, because a lot of times things will kind of explode out a little bit. It's just kind of a good practice just in case. And you can kind of see right there, this is what happens when you live at altitude. So I put all of those guys in, and then once I have them kind of settled in, you can use a toothpick for this, but I have this little rubber, I don't know how to describe it. It's a tool for clay, actually. And I just use that to kind of spread the liquid paint out into the corners so it fills up the pan. Sometimes I'll kind of tap lift it up and then drop it down, just like half an inch, just to kind of tap the paint down, if that makes sense. And do all this while it's wet, and then you can kind of let it dry overnight. I didn't let it dry before I started painting with it. You don't need to, but yeah, that's kind of how I fill the the palette. And then I made swatches of the paint to play around with the paint and the paintbrush, feel how, like the spring of the paintbrush, how much water it held, and also just to kind of see the colors and see how they dried and how they would mix. Dan Smith paints have something, they do something called granulation very, very well. Granulation is kind of where the pigments separate a little bit. A lot of times they'll settle into the lower parts of the textured paper, and you'll get a really, really beautiful mottled effect. It's such a beautiful effect, and Dan Smith paints are just beautifully granulating, so I wanted to see how those would work. So once I had played around with them, I started with the actual piece. I wanted to use the masking fluid quite a bit to show you some different techniques because I love masking fluid. So the first technique that I'm going to show you is using masking fluid on wet paper. I want to create these glowing mushrooms, and so I'm going around the mushrooms that I've sketched out with some just clean water, and I'm making sure that the reason I'm going around it instead of coating the whole paper is because that way I can get a harsh line. It won't go over into where the mushrooms are. Then I place the masking fluid on top, and because the paper is wet, the masking fluid will spread out into that kind of wet paper, and you'll get much more of a softer effect. I'm doing the same thing with some reflections, and then I'm going in and using the fine point to add in where the little highlights are going to be on the mushrooms themselves, and I'm kind of adding a little bit more detail to the lake as well, like where the water is going to be. And then finally, I used the masking fluid to add some little dots of like fairy dust to the piece. Once that was done, I started with a light wash of watercolor. So I sprayed the entire piece and made it nice and wet and just started putting different a few different colors on to establish the overall colors of the piece and where like what everything was gonna look like. In watercolor, you want to work from light to dark, and you definitely want to work in layers. So I like to start with a loose, light wash that just kind of establishes what the colors are going to be, where things are, and some of the basic elements of shading, as well as establishing some kind of like basic textures. And then I just start to build up from there. I have a 3-color palette that I'm working with of the green, the purple, and the blue, which was just a really pretty palette to work with for kind of an enchanted mushroom forest image, and that's what inspired me. And once I finished the wet on wet, you can see it's very loose and very blended. It's very kind of free flowing. That's when I go in painting wet on dry paper, and I can get more crisp and clear edges, and that's when I can start adding in more details. So I am using a indigo color that I've mixed using mostly the Mayan blue and then adding in some of the purple, the ultramarine, was it called ultramarine rose? No, rose ultramarine, that was it, the rose ultramarine. If you mix those two together, you'll get a nice indigo. And I'm using that to start building up some of the forest trees in the background. And then as I get further away, I'm altering that color a little bit and making it more cool toned so that it appears further away. And I can get a little bit more distance. And as you can see, the masking fluid has dried to be this kind of light yellow color, and you can see it's rejecting where the paint is. And once we take that off, it'll be all white underneath, and you can get, it's really fun, the effects that you can get with this. Once that layer has dried, I go in with an even darker version of the indigo, and I add in just some basic shading to the trees and a little bit of the wood bark texture, primarily to the trees in front because they are in the foreground, like closer to us, and so you're going to see more detail. And then I take some darker green and start adding in some little like grass around the pond, just kind of building up detail. Something that is very helpful with watercolor, like I said, is really to start loose and add in detail as you go. Then I'm working on the mushrooms. There isn't too much that I need to do to these because a lot of the base of them was established with the like base color, but I want to add in a little bit more detail with the shading and just give them a little bit more structure on the actual stem as well as the mushroom cap itself. In the mushrooms, you can really see what I was talking about earlier with the purple, how it really does kind of like shift colors. Then I removed the masking fluid from the little pond. Then I reapplied some masking fluid to some smaller areas to preserve the brightest white highlights. And then I went back over all of that. So you can actually layer masking fluid essentially, and use it, take it off and then add more, take it off and add more, whatever you need to do. It's very, very useful. So I started throwing in the reflections in that pond area and adding in just kind of the water and trying to make it look like a pond. And just kind of building up some final details before I take off all the masking fluid. What I'm using to take off the masking fluid is something called a crafter's square. I got it at the Dollar Tree really recently, and it's amazing for removing masking fluid. I highly recommend it. But if you don't have it, you can use an eraser. Works pretty well. And then once I removed that, I went over with some light watercolor to tint that like glow so that it was reflective of the colors of the mushrooms that were glowing. So you can go back over the parts that you've protected with your masking fluid and then add color to them, and you can kind of use the water to soften those edges even more as well. So yeah. That's kind of it. I think I'm getting pretty close to the end here. I'm just kind of adding in some final little details, and then I have the last little pieces of masking fluid to remove. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that I gave you some tips on how to use masking fluid and how to use watercolor specifically. And I am excited to see what everyone makes with the Dan Smith paints, and I hope that you enjoy them. If you are interested in getting your own box, then definitely make sure you check out our website. Link will be in the description box below. And I will see you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye!